Hi, everybody. So, I wanted to talk about victim mentality today and what I feel about victim mentality in reference to the Stockholm bond. Um, I want to start off by saying that before, 2017, I never thought of myself as being a victim, and I hated the concept of victimhood. Anytime anybody came into my view and complained about anything, it didn't matter what it was, it didn't matter how they got there, it didn't matter. I would always find a way to talk down to them and belittle their problem. I would always say, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Keep walking. Etc., etc., etc. But after 2017, when I had a full-blown, decline in my mental health, I had the onset of the anxiety disorder that I had right now. I had the onset of the symptoms that I had. I revised that thesis because I was physically not able to get out of bed that year. And against my will, I had to acknowledge that I was a victim. Because my brain would not allow me to use the same, mechanisms of pressing on and getting over it and keep walking that it used to. My brain would physically not allow me that courtesy. And it was extremely scary because it was a loss of identity. I used to be this very type A oriented, capable person that always told people to buck up. And I transformed into a vegetable, basically, overnight. And I don't say it as a demeaning thing. It's just what it was. So the Stockholm victim, or the target, whatever you want to call it, doesn't have the capacity to not see themselves as a victim. Because the strategy of not seeing yourself as a victim has failed you in the past. Because you were encouraged to press on in the face of extreme duress and coercion and obligation, and the sense of obligation. That I can't be a victim, I can't do this, I just need to, put myself together all the time. Ignoring the psychological coercion and the duress that you're under, until your brain flops and can no longer function as it used to. And so assigning blame to the narcissist is essential in disentangling the roles, in the relationship. Because the narcissist puts an immense amount of pressure on the victim to make amends all the time. And at some point, that making amends undoes you. Because you don't see the coercion that you're under, and You don't see the aggressive nature of the narcissist, right? So you, against your will, really against your will, you're forced to admit that you've been duped. You know, that this relationship was fake, and that you were on the receiving end of a scam. You know, doesn't matter what it is. It could be co-worker relationship. It could be a father-daughter relationship, whatever the situation is. And that scam has put you into a holding pattern of meeting other narcissists and sociopaths. So you are forced to reverse roles in the situation and say, you know what, I'm a person that is that has been duped, that is on the receiving end of narcissistic abuse. I'm a victim. It's not optional. It's not optional to not see yourself that way, because how else would you call it? You know, when somebody steals your wallet, you have to call it what it is. You know, you're a victim of theft. You're a victim of mind control. You're a victim of, you know, anything. You can be a victim of anything. You know, people were sitting in their condominium in Florida and recently, and you know, hundreds of people died because one of the architects or the engineers or whoever, you know, created a faulty building. What do we call those people? Do we call them survivors? Do we call them, you know, do we call them, you know, I don't know, thrivers? We call them victims because they are a victim of somebody else's criminal negligence. Okay? So, the assault that the narcissist has launched at you is nothing short of a victim-perpetrator relationship. And it has to be seen as such because if the Stockholm victim takes accountability and places that accountability within themselves, they're never going to be able to break free of the relationship. Because if there's still something that you can change in this relationship to make it work, if you still have some sort of accountability for everything that they did to you, then you don't see them as the antagonizer, as the perpetrator, as the manipulator that they are. And it's true, we can all handle ourselves better in the moment in certain situations, right? So sometimes you've acted irrationally in this relationship. Sometimes you've acted badly in response to what the narcissist was doing. But you can't hold that accountability because it was a master plan from the perspective of the abuser to provoke you into bringing out your worst characteristics and to undermining the structure of your brain, you know, the structure and function of your brain. Now, where am I going with this? The problem with being a victim of anything is that it can go on indefinitely. You know, if you've already done no contact and you're used to seeing yourself as a victim of narcissists, as a victim of the social system that supports them, as a victim of people in general, as a person that doesn't have any sort of will, right? That can go on indefinitely. That can go on forever, you know. There's no cause and effect relationship in the here and now. between what you do and the outcome that you produce. You can always fall back on the trauma or the situation that you were in as a crutch that formulated, the faults that you have right now, as opposed to owning the faults that you have right now in the here and now, and in creating a cause and effect relationship between what you do and the outcome that it yields. So if you're talking to a healthy person, and if you're reactive, or if you're triggered by something they said, you have to draw a line and say, listen, I'm out of this narcissistic bind that I was in. Now these emotions, these feelings, these triggers, this reactivity, this lack of empathy for this person is my doing. It has nothing to do with what X, Y, or Z happened. If you don't do that, then you can carry that victim status forever until the end of time. So at some point, you have to take responsibility for things that happen in your life. It's true. In the narcissistic relationship, in the narcissistic bind, a lot of the things that you did, said, thought, without even knowing it, or a byproduct of the trauma bond that they created in you. But in order to be free of them, you have to disentangle yourself from that trauma bond. You can't carry it with you for the rest of your life. The problem with labeling yourself as a traumatized is that creates an identity in you that you can never transcend. If you don't have an alternate identity to supplant the identity of trauma victim, then the cycle continues forever. And I have some tools that I learned that strengthen executive function so that you can rebuild the brain and you could rebuild your identity after this situation that I want to share with you. Because in truth, we don't want to think about them. We don't want to think of ourselves as victims in the long term. We want to see the cause and effect relationship between what we do now so that we can improve ourselves, so that we can be better people in our own minds, right? So that's where victim mentality becomes unacceptable. But here's the catch. Only you can make that decision, right? Sometimes your brain is so compromised out of these relationships that you're still reading into people's sociopathic traits. You're still trying to learn how to trust people. You still have a lot of anxiety about the human race. I still have a lot of anxiety and problems with the human race after knowing what I've learned. But at the end of the day, I understand that if I give in to the idea that my brain is not my own, that I don't have, there's no cause and effect between what I do today and what happens tomorrow, I'm still a possession of these narcissists. I'm still at their beck and call in a way, because my reactivity to what they did and my refusal to take accountability in the here and now for my life indefinitely is victim mentality. It's the idea that I don't have any agency. And I remember those days when I literally had no agency. Like, I literally felt that I couldn't do anything. It was very, very defeating for me. So, the brain space that they put you in is not your responsibility, because if you had a knowledge of the brain space that they would put you in before you met them, you wouldn't have entered this cult or this relationship or this job, right? But that space is now yours. You have to take ownership of that space. Because if you don't do that, then all your suffering would have been in vain. That's how I see it. That the withdrawal that you went through after you left them, the anger that you felt, that helped you understand the narrative better of what they did to you, the camaraderie that you had with all of the people in the narcissistic abuse community, all of it is going to be in vain. This is the way you have to think. If you don't continue the story, if you don't become Dorothy and be like, there's no place like home, everything that's going upstairs over here, everything that's going on over here is my responsibility. And if I don't, cook, I'm not going to eat. If I don't work, I'm not going to save. If I, you have to draw these things and start to put one foot in front of the other, is what I'm trying to say. And that will be the ultimate victory. Post-traumatic revival. The phoenix spreading its wings. Without a vision of where you're going, you're always going to be thinking about where you were. I'm trying to engineer like a 12-step program for narcissistic abuse recovery right now. And I'm really reading a lot of addiction literature. And the common thread behind all this literature is that, addiction or dependency or whatever you want to call it, divides your life into a before and after. That's the nature of dependency. So if you have an alcoholic dependency, does it really help you to, disparage yourself and curse the bottle for the rest of your life, and fault the bottle for all of the things that are going on in your life in the here and now and in the future? It doesn't help to do that. It helps to create a recovery lifestyle. And that's what I'm working on right now. I want to create a book that explores like a recovery lifestyle for people that are coming out of the Stockholm bond, the different stages of grief that happen when a person emerges out of a narcissistic relationship. Because right now we have a community that is voicing, the faults of the narcissists, how much we fucking hate the narcissists, how the world would be better off without the narcissists, how we have to send them back to hell, how we have to throw stones at them. And while that is very, very, very good, it takes up a lot of emotional energy to do that. And the energy repository is finite when you wake up in the morning. Where you distribute your energy is important. And unfortunately, for people that have gone through this, it's very hard to distribute your energy evenly because of the lack of executive skills. And I created a methodology on executive functioning, how to improve executive functioning. And I'm working on that right now as we speak. I want to introduce that to you guys and see what you think about it. Because there's no forward-thinking mentality you know, when it comes to narcissistic abuse recovery. There's no structure, there's no methodology, there's no data on what works in the afterlife, you know, in the post-narcissistic revival period. When you are done contemplating them, you know, that you see the insanity of contemplating them because you figured them out already. And I feel like that's very important, because if without that, you can't change your brain structurally, and your identity will always be that of a victim in recovery. Alright? Because it's ambiguous to call yourself a victim in recovery. No, you're a person that had passions before you met this person. You had passions when you were in a relationship with this person. You have passions right now that you want to explore. And you need to be given a toolbox, much like an alcoholic or a cocaine addict needs to be given a toolbox to give life and light to those passions and to feel comfortable about it. Because the challenge of the Stockholm bond is that you feel like the future is tainted by the past, and it doesn't have to be. There can be a divorce from your past life. You know, there needs to be a divorce from your past life, and there needs to be basically a restructuring of your entire life, in my opinion. I was watching a video on a person that went into rehab. I don't remember what drug they were using. But one of the takeaways that I had from that video is like, if you want to quit a substance, change everything. And it really resonated with me, because if you change everything, then there's less familiarity for you between your identity in the past and your current identity. And the less familiarity there is, the more room for growth, the more room for accountability, the more room for reflection, and the more thriving that can happen. And once you start to thrive, and really thrive on your own 2 feet, that's when the psychopath is suffocated. And that's the irony, because they fucking hate your success. It's like they're waiting for you to come back to them. They're waiting for you to collapse emotionally and return back to them. That's not fucking happening. You know, that's where the hope is. The hope is in the future, not in the past. And you get to draw that line in the sand. Nobody can draw it for you. And I think that you're ready. I think that you're all ready to do that. There needs to be a line in the sand where you say, I figured y'all's out. I'm taking my life back. And I hope to become a person that creates that model for future generations. It really disturbs me that as we speak, children are being psychopathically groomed. And what I'm saying is timeless and will be timeless unless we figure out a way to put those motherfuckers on an island and blow them up. You know, I'm seeing lots of hope for my future. I'm seeing lots of good things happening to me because I've gotten over the hurdle of identifying only with this, you know. Anyway.